Alrighty, welcome everyone to our Monday night team training call. I'm super excited about this one. I've got two of my friends joining us tonight, and Kate and Sean, well, they're just incredible people. They're huge-hearted. They've been around high performance. They've been in the fitness industry for, I don't even know, like I'm guessing like 25, 30 years, something like that. You're probably thinking, wow, they must be, started when they were like 5 because they look so youthful. But they are just amazing when it comes to fitness and health and looking after yourself from the inside out. And tonight's call is all about energy management. I've just recently done one of their diagnostics and it was insane. I absolutely loved it. And I found out a lot about myself and who I'm giving my energy to and my power to, and putting like little things into my day that can really help me recover. Because in this profession, sometimes, let's face it, we can reach burnout. We seem to put ourselves out there for everybody, not just our teammates, but our customers, our family, our husbands, everybody. And we don't leave any time at the end of the day for ourselves because it's just every spare moment goes into the business or everybody else. So what we're going to talk about tonight is how to use your time wisely and your energy, and these guys are professionals at this. So I'm going to leave it there, guys. Just take yourselves off mute and the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, what we thought we'd do is we might start with a 15-minute introduction. So there's a bit of groundwork around that introduction. So we have a slideshow, and I'll do half and Kate will do the other half, and we'll just talk you through sort of what's behind each slide and provide that bit of a foundation for what energy management's all about. So this is our introduction. Christine has been across it before. Energy management is something we like to call work hard smarter. It's probably not the first time you've heard about working smarter. Over the last decade, we've seen a proliferation of memes around work smarter, not harder. Hold on, how do I change the slide here? Oh, I think I've got to click this. Oh, there we go, click the page. And most work smarter memes are about time management. We hear things like time yourself, set goals for your diary theme, your time development, your email management strategy. And there's so many really great tools around time management, with the mobile phones these days having so many organizing apps. And they're good things, but I think one of the keys for us is recognizing it is really good stuff. And if you're an entrepreneur, you're going to find even more stuff out there. You can read Tim Ferriss's 4-Hour Work Week about how to work smarter. And there's some real gems in this book about managing your life and priorities. But we like that idea of working smarter, but I'm not sure if it's because of our background working as entrepreneurs or as high performance athletes, but we're a bit cautious about leaving out the work hard part, which is sort of, your 4-Hour Work Week, Tim Ferriss, good on you, mate. That's fantastic. But hard work is really still necessary to achieve most things in life. So we kind of feel like we have to think differently about how we can be smarter while working harder. And that's a little bit of the title. And instead of talking about how we need to manage our time better, we want to really start thinking about managing our energy better. And because time isn't really even a resource to manage, it's actually a constraint. It doesn't change. We have 24 hours in every day. Look, it helps to organize and manage our time. We talk about that, but we think more about managing our energy within time. Think about an 8-hour day where you have, where you're burnt out, you've been exhausted. It's the end of a few weeks of release. And, how effective are you on that day compared to 2 hours when you're super energized? Which one do you get more done in? So we want to really start to shift that thinking and that meme around, time and energy. Our program, we have an energy diagnostic, which is what Christine filled out, and we followed up with some coaching. And with regard to the work we're doing, we really want to help people become masterful at energy management. So you can think of it as, yes, be time productive, but be energy effective. And it's about working harder at the right time, but we're going to introduce a really strong concept around recovery. And it's recovering harder at the right time. Like it's allowing us to say, how can we work hard? We can only do it if we're balancing with recovery. So why does energy matter? Well, it pretty much runs every system in your body. So we're going to have a nice little slideshow here. There are 11 systems. Hopefully this works. You can read them as you click. Read them as we click. Integumentary, which is interesting. Muscular, skeletal, urinary, reproductive, respiratory, cardiovascular, digestive, lymphatic, endocrine, nervous system. So those are all your major systems in your body. And we know that all of them have something in common. They run on energy. And if you're low in energy on one of them, any one or all of them will be compromised, and your performance, your health, and your enjoyment of life can be compromised. You can think about it. I'm quite aware right now we're trying to get renovations done before we go to Canada for Christmas, and it's just like we're piling on stuff, and you get a cough and it lingers longer than you can because your immune system, because you're spending so much mental and physical energy on getting everything together, your immune system gets compromised. So we have to think of these things being completely interconnected. Hold on. Why, when we think of any one of those systems, we might realize that we don't always consider any one of them enough, particularly some of the less known ones when it comes to energy management. And I mean, we are aware of it, but if you think about the use of the brain, simple thinking, like we're really aware when we're physical and we train hard and we work our body that's tiring. But simple thinking is interesting. The brain actually requires a significant amount of energy. Brain cells themselves take twice as many calories as muscle cells. So when energy is low, humans are really prone to errors in judgment and poor decision making. You're also more likely to be irrational and emotional, which you might recognize in how that affects your relationships and partnerships. But when we think about that influence of being really low on energy, what's really scary is if we look at some of the statistics on this, because of overworked, overstressed doctors and surgeons, nurses, and other healthcare workers who are often operating on their last ounces of energy. And we hear, I don't know if anyone there is in healthcare, but they're on call 20-hour shifts, and their brains are probably not functioning at their peak. A hospital is actually one of the riskiest places to go when you're sick. A recent study in the Journal of Patient Safety projected that medical errors, now this is just stats from the US, but they're per capita about the same as Australia. They account for 300,000 to 400,000 deaths annually per year, making medical errors the third leading cause of death after heart disease and cancer. So that's pretty scary when we think about such an important profession where energy is so important. And the thing about it, and I've worked with some groups in healthcare, and I've worked with elite sports as well, is that some of our biggest roadblocks to getting it right have to do with our mindset about energy, fatigue, and recovery. So in some environments and cultures where people are chronically overworked, like in healthcare, often the only way people cope is to talk about fatigue with a sense of pride. Yeah, burnout, it's a badge of honor. Like, I've been working, 24 hours straight with 2 hours sleep or something like that. It's kind of crazy. I'm not sure it's something you've ever done anywhere in your life, been proud of. Maybe after 3 weeks of poor sleep, if you've ever had children or new job or constant work travel. And if we think about some of these professions, and I'm not sure what all of yours are, I'd say that healthcare needs to be up there at the pinnacle of effective energy management, given what's at stake. So we might ask, just considering for yourselves, what about you? Where is that low energy maybe affecting your own lives? But what if we said it was possible to work even harder than you thought, as long as you did it smarter? And that's what we want to kind of highlight today, is just some original introductory insights into that. How did we arrive at this topic in the first place? Well, it actually started, I did my PhD research on overtraining and burnout. So I was looking at athletes who were pretty good at working hard, but they just kept doing more and more and more. That more is better in their mindset, and getting fatigued, injured, sick, and burnt out. And there's a lot of science on fatigue and recovery in sport, but athletes and coaches were still getting it wrong. So they weren't so good at working smarter. And really what it turned out was because their view of energy management was really too narrow at the time. Now, we wanted, with my doctorate, we wanted to understand how we could help broaden the view and get smarter at energy management, decision-making, and actions. And that's where it's relevant to everyone outside of sport as well. So for the last 15 years, maybe it's not quite 30, but maybe
I would go with that.
We'll go with that. Kate and I
collectively
we've been applying some of the outcomes of this research to clients both in and out of sports. So we kind of split our time between business clients, entrepreneurs, and professional athletes, personal training clients, and some even performing artists, moms, dads, and kids who all want to be more effective and energetic in their busy daily lives. So really focus on helping people have that positive transformation, managing that really number one resource, which is energy. More recently, I just sort of mentioned at the very beginning, we've refined the research to develop a detailed diagnostic profile, which is what Christine took part in. We did a pilot with that so people can really understand what's going on for them, and that, that's potential follow-on in the future for people. So let's look at a little bit more background on some of the core concepts, and then we'll go from there, and we'll probably be another 10 minutes and then look at doing some Q&A and going from there. So the first place we want to start is looking at the relationship between stress and energy. And it's kind of interesting because when we talk about energy management, a key word we want to define is stress. If you think about how we use the word stress in everyday life, it's typically pretty negative. Like, I'm stressed about this, I'm stressed about that, it's a stressful day at work. It's generally negative. But when we look at it in a scientific perspective, what we find is that it really depends on how you perceive it. Hans Selye, who's an endocrinologist and a famous researcher on stress, he's probably one of the key researchers. He distinguished between negative and positive stress, and he called negative stress a distress, and he defined it as a persistent stress not resolved through coping or adaptation. So if you think about maybe a toxic relationship you've ever experienced in your life, perhaps it was nothing but trouble. We pretty much put those in the too hard basket. That's sort of definite distress. Well, in contrast, he referred to positive stress as eustress, and he defined it as stress that improves your functioning, makes you strong, more resilient. So if you think about exercise is actually a stressor, but with the right cycle of recovery, it actually makes your body stronger and fitter, and we feel good about it. We feel a sense of accomplishment. So there's a real positive aspects, but there's no doubt it's a stressor. And what we want to talk about, in fact, is forgetting the negative and positive labels, but really just considering that anything that demands energy is a stressor. So we think of stress as energy out. Now, some energy out is very negative energy out, and some energy out is more positive. So exercise is positive energy out, but you still, like the athletes training, they need to balance that with something. So one of the big things to come out of my PhD research is that muscle stress from physical exertion is only one form of stress, and stress comes in many, many forms. Muscle growth is only one form of adaptation. So when we looked at the research on overtraining and burnout, we found that despite a lot of common knowledge about stress and energy demands, sports doctors, scientists, physiologists, athletes, and coaches, they tended to only look at the physical aspects of fatigue and energy. And they were often left wondering what was going on when an athlete was tired, yet they weren't really training what they thought was too hard. And what we found is that you actually have to think of 4 other categories to consider when measuring and managing energy effectively. So I'm going to flick to Kate here so she can have a turn at chit-chatting along here, and then, yeah.
This is actually really interesting because this is something I think that we've sort of created, out of Sean's PhD work, but it's a concept of matching categories up, and we'll talk about that in just a second. But these categories, as you can see here, are social, environmental, mental, and emotional stress in addition to physical stress. So, for example, when we think of mental and emotional stress, we know we can feel absolutely exhausted, say, after a tough day at the office, or say a day with the kids have been sick all weekend, and we may not have actually sort of physically exerted ourselves and got energy out that way, but mentally and emotionally it's absolutely exhausting. We know that people also experience energy demand from social interactions. So, for example, that draining person that you have at the pub on the weekend, energy out, right? So, so the physical environment around us also has a big impact. Think noise, sound, pressure, the weather, time zone changes. That's a big one for Sean. He travels a lot, and if any of you guys do travel a fair bit, you'll know the impact that time zones have on you. It can be exhausting shopping from one to the other. So we have to consider many forms of energy demand, not just that physical one. So we do all have limits, that's for sure. So if we're thinking of multiple categories that demand our energy, and we know that we will have limits on our energy output, then we know that if not paying attention to all of those 5 categories of stresses, we can then get energy depleted pretty quickly and significantly without getting the right energy back in again. So we often don't realize the source of that energy either. So that's what we really want to have a look at. So to manage our energy, we also need to talk about recovery. Ta-da! One of the most important parts. So the thing is, we know from doing physical activity that the stress on the body does minor damage to your muscles. So any of you in the fitness industry will understand there's micro trauma that happens to connective tissues when you're training. So the mitochondria split apart and then repair again, making you stronger, which is why you get muscle soreness after a workout. But the body's smart, and with the right recovery, it adapts and repairs stronger than it was before. So the same thing happens, guys, emotionally. You can think of mental or emotional stress creating micro trauma in the brain. But with the right mental and emotional recovery, the brain will actually adapt and get stronger. Therefore, it's actually useful to consider our positive or negative experience of stress, actually in a good way. So how we respond to stress with effective recovery. If your response to stress includes getting enough recovery, you're likely to get stronger, but you have to get that extra recovery in order to build that strength. But this is our issue. Is recovery a guilty pleasure? Hands up. I know it is in my house. So, the key here is that we see recovery activities like time to ourselves, relaxing, chilling with a partner as guilty pleasures and luxuries that we shouldn't really be doing and don't really deserve, rather than actual responsibility. So what we have to do is change that mindset, guys, and start looking at being responsible for our recovery, right? We want to change our mindset, which is really challenging, from stresses as the key to making us stronger, and think of recovery as a key ingredient to making us awesome, right? So in this way, we can define recovery simply as energy in, the energy going back into your body that will make you stronger. So here are our categories here, and you can see on the left-hand side, you've got the energy out, and on the right-hand side, you've got energy in, depending on how you're looking at the screen. So what we're looking at is matching like for like. If you have social energy out, you're looking at social energy in. So specifically in diagnosing and planning energy management, we want to think of matching stress type with a recovery type to achieve balanced energy across all 5 categories. And these categories cover pretty much everything in your world. So for example, if you have a stressful interaction with someone difficult in your life, could be husband, partner, friend, parent, family, then recovery will be energizing interactions with someone positive in your life. So you've got that like for like matching. So social energy out, match with social energy in. And if you have high demand on your mental energy, think capacity, problem solving, then recovery would be mentally checking out. So sitting there, not thinking about any of those things, switching off, doing something that's mentally recharging. Mental energy out matched again with mental energy in. So each of these areas is segmented. So all this taps into the idea that you can work harder than you actually thought, as long as you recover harder than you thought. Okay, so where are we next? So energy diagnostics. So the key stuff that Christine was involved in was how to become masterful in her energy. So this is something that she's been part of in our program, but it's something that you guys can take on as well. And it's a crucial part to start with the diagnostic. And we have our diagnostics quite in depth, as Christine will be able to tell you. And it covers all these different areas and each subcategory within those areas. And at some point, if anybody's interested in doing the diagnostic, welcome to join us to do this.
But you can sort of do like we'll sort of give you the basic highlights tonight of the different categories, and that's sort of way of thinking differently about your energy. So yeah,
definitely. So we'll go through it just very, very briefly, but like I said, high level. Yeah, there's a lot more to it than this, but this sort of gives you an idea of where it sits. So these are signs and symptoms of stress and recovery balance. The first section of the diagnostic. Are we going too quickly, by the way? Is this okay? Everybody good?
Thumbs up, everybody.
Yep. Cool. I love a good thumbs up. We got one thumb. We'll go with that. 2. So the first section of the diagnostic is the need to identify symptoms, obviously, of energy imbalance. So seeing where you're at in terms of your energy. Simply acknowledging the warning signs that something's out of kilter or not quite right. So here are a few. Some ongoing fatigue, perhaps a little bit irritable, not quite feeling yourself, a little bit anxious, a little bit overworked. And these can be minor or major at this stage, depending where you're at. And the second section of diagnostic is about identifying current energy decision-making habits. So things that you're doing on a regular basis to either help or hinder your energy management, based on things in your life that influence how you respond to energy imbalance symptoms. So the social world around you is one of those things. What's going on situationally in your life? How people in key relationships influence you and your sense of self and everything that's going on inside of you. So you may feel like, for example, personality affects that. So if somebody's always seems to be getting to you in a certain way, why is that, and how is that happening, and how is that affecting your energy, and is it always repetitive? It's the same thing every week. Why do I always fall for that same thing every time? And it's really depleting. So, and of course, we mentioned previously, I think, the third and fourth sections are about detailed identification of all the areas of stress or energy demand in your life, and all the areas of recovery or energy rejuvenation. You can see here you've got those two sides appearing again.
So one of the things you can think about when you look just at this model, and it's quite high level, is just kind of just do a little mental calculus right now around going, where am I spending energy? Like, where am I spending energy in relationships and social energy? Am I indoors in a unnatural lighting environment? Is there a lot of noise around me? Environmental? Do I travel a lot? Mental, like how much am I using this thing for, complex problem solving, or just kind of trying to organize my day? You have a lot on, so this thing is always full. Emotional is a little bit more like, how am I spending energy in terms of, that's probably more that deeper feeling about yourself. Do I have self, do I challenge myself? Do I have negative thoughts? Do I have self-esteem? Am I feeling that anxiety around myself a lot? Am I spending energy there? And that physical is not just, we talk a lot about exercise, but it's considering, it's housework, it's running around with the kids, it's, if you are any kind of physical job, as well as exercise that you get, even though it's positive, we have to consider it as an energy spend. If you can sort of do that mental calculus while you're sitting there going, where am I spending energy right now? And we're not going to look at the detailed diagnostic, but just as a light diagnostic right now, you go calculate all of those and then ask yourself, am I actually getting recovery in those categories? Like, and social recovery is an interesting one. So that, connecting with people that you like to hang out with and that you feel energized by. But we have to be aware where sometimes the social recovery crosses over into potentially, a physical stressor. So like, a night out with friends is very socially recovering. You have a good time, you engage, you feel energized, you feel really good about having that night out. But if it goes along with 6 or 8 drinks, then there's a lot of physical stress that can be disruptive of sleep recovery mechanisms. So it's just knowing that even some activities can be recovery and stress all wrapped up in one. But yeah, just kind of while you're sitting there, think of your calculation, just sort of high level. Am I getting matched recovery in all those categories?
Mm. And we do tend to recover in similar ways. We tend to recover and just assume it's a massage or it's to meditation, when it might actually need something like a social interaction recovery, where you might not think that. So that's why it's really important to match the two.
And look, sometimes the emotional recovery too is when people ask about that, like some activities will double up as different types of recovery as well. So like if you meditate, for example, that's a great mental recovery. And people might find it emotionally recovering, but some people don't find it very emotionally recovering, because when they're meditating, they're dealing with a lot of the thoughts and self-esteem issues that come rushing forward into their house. They actually find that stressful. So, like when we look at the diagnostic, we actually talk about things like emotional recovery being reaching out to a professional, asking for that help to kind of if there is some deep-seated stuff in there. We're just all human beings, and really when we present this in its full, in its full glory, we talk about a continuum. And it's really an energy health continuum where we go from, at one end, being burnt out, could be physical illness, autoimmune dysfunction, mental health issues, all the way up to high performance health. But we all just move up and down this continuum. We don't say there's anything wrong with anyone, but if you're depleted enough energetically, health wise, you can end up at the bottom of the continuum. And it's not like there's something wrong with you. There's something wrong with the balance. So it's not something flawed for you as a human being. And as a psychologist, I deal with a lot of people with struggling with mental health issues, and they, kind of get attached to the sense of there's something flawed or wrong with me. And it's not. It's often that there's just way too many stressors in way too many areas that have been going on for way too long. And they're just absolutely exhausted, mentally, emotionally, and everything else. So that's just kind of that, being aware of all those different categories. And that's probably the main concept we really wanted to share with you today.
Yeah, I think just a point I'd like to put in there, because I think it's useful for all those high achievers out there, is that there's a temptation to get straight into goal planning mode, and we must create visions, and we must create missions, and we must set out our lives in this amazingly checklisted way. And what we've discovered from doing this work is that a lot of people are so far into burnout that they're not even able to compute what that looks like. They can't, I'll ask somebody, how do you feel about this? Could you create a vision around it? And they'll say to me, look, Kate, I can't even put one foot in front of the other. I'm so exhausted. So this actually is that almost the precursor to setting those visions and missions out, is to say, get you back to zero, get you back to balance. Because once you're in burnout, your brain will not work for you. It is your brain choosing to switch off. It's your body and your brain saying, I'm done. Hands up, it's all over. So this is so key in creating that foundation then for creating your purpose, your vision, your mission, all of your beautiful personal development work that you're doing. Be really conscious of where you're at. And if you're struggling to do that, it's probably because you're either in burnout or you're just not balanced around your energy. So that's where this stuff's really, really key. And even if you can take a couple of little take-homes away from even this simple model here today, it makes a really big difference. I've personally been doing a lot of this work on my own and in quite stressful situations too, with working kids. And just being able to put those micro injections of recovery back into my world in those little sections has made a massive difference just to my waking energy, but also my sleeping energy at the end of the day. I'm finding myself less angry, less frustrated, a bit more time for the kids. And then I'll physically and mentally check out if I feel like I'm getting too far along with one of those areas. And that's been super powerful. So hopefully everybody would get a bit of a take home from that too.
So we're probably, that's kind of covers really the introductory section, and hopefully you got something out of it, but we'd be happy to chit chat a little bit more, take some questions, and just go, because there's a lot. Yeah, there's 5 years of research and 100,000 words behind this, and another 15 years of implementing with people. So I'm just going to escape from that screen. If you want to go back to any slide, let me know, but this sort of allows me to move around a little bit more. So
awesome. That was fantastic, guys. And I think it's so relevant for the people within our team and our profession, because we don't have set hours in what we do, and we kind of work around the clock all the time in stolen moments. And if we're not on top of this, guys, you will face burnout, and you're more likely to leave the profession because you think it's all just too hard. So for me, some tips that some tips that have really worked for me, like, when I do the training calls, when I do 3-way calls, when I'm doing whatever, it takes a lot of energy. So something that Kate and Sean have really helped me with is, okay, after I've done a 3-way call, rather than doing them back to back, hang on, sorry guys.
There goes the mute.
You didn't want to hear that. So what I was saying was, so instead of doing back-to-back calls, if I know a call is going to go for 15 minutes and I need to be switched on, because they are mentally, you've got to be present, you've got to be focused, high energy, then I'll take 5-10 minutes, whatever I need, to just switch off, put some music on, do a quick meditation before the next call. So I'm recovering after each call rather than going back to back to back to back. Because it used to be a badge of honor. We used to always say, oh, I can't talk, you'll have to catch me tonight because I got back to back calls, And we used to, it was a badge of honor, but not anymore. It's awesome. Like taking that time. So also, after, I think it was you, Sean, that was telling me there's all these settings on your phone as well, where you can start to turn the lights down on your phone, or you know, there's settings on your TV, there's settings on your computer where you can actually put it in night mode so that you can start prepping your body for sleep as well. So can you guys just talk around a few of those little tips as well? And if you've got any question, guys, just add it to the chat down the bottom. We'll get them answered.
Cool.
Yeah, actually, one of the points, Christine did make a really good point to me a couple of weeks back, and this is something I thought was really interesting as well. I thought she was going to say it, but she didn't, so I'll say it, which is that sometimes, and again, matching recovery to what you're doing is important. So what Christine had said was that sometimes she's got maybe 5 minutes in between a call, but what she doesn't want to do is then lie down and close her eyes because she wants to stay on and focused. So she was saying she's finding ways to get that energy back in, but do it such that she still stays on point. So she's still ready for that next call. She hasn't completely switched off. So energy management isn't about completely shutting your brain down. It's just about taking a moment to just have 5 and just literally switch your mindset out of what you were doing that might have been taking energy and into something else. And we can talk a little bit more about sleep too, if you want to.
But one of the things that's so key, and Christine, I think you're a great candidate for this because you're a real driver, a real performer, and certainly in my research stood out was that I started in an area where there's a lot of science around this. So like we don't really find the science anywhere else, but in sport, you know, I work in professional football. The players run around with a GPS tracker on them. They know how fast they're running, how they know how far they're running, they know how much time they spend at, you know, 100% burst speed, at 80%, at 70%, at 50%. They know they're monitoring everything. And, you know, even there, they weren't getting it right. And a lot had to do with the mindset. So a lot of it has to do with this, you know, permission to recover. But it's very difficult. It's very difficult to sort of decide to suddenly check out. But if you understand a bit of the science, one of the things that we mentioned, or Kate mentioned earlier, was micro injections of recovery. What we do know from sport physically, and we know that the rest of the systems, those other 4 categories, work the same in the body, is that if you say, for example, we call it interval training, if you go flat out for a minute, and then you try to take a 10-second break, and then you try to go flat out again for a minute, 10 seconds is not enough recovery for high intensity physical activity. Your second 10 minute will be degraded by about 80% or 70%. And your next one will be 40%. But if you go 1 minute and then 1 minute rest, your second minute of full on will be about 99% of your first one. So we know the right amount of recovery timed really well allows you to keep going at a really, really high pace. Now, mentally, it's not 1 for 1 like physically, right? So we don't have to think of, 1 hour on, 1 hour off, although that would be pretty nice. But yeah. It mentally and emotionally can sometimes just be that 1 hour on or half an hour on and then 5 minutes switch off. And that's what we talk about, those micro injections of recovery.
We've just I've just looked at the chat now, so there's actually some great things going on in this chat today. But there's a good question actually just at the bottom here. So we've got one here from Sharon: juggling family and work. Yeah, the norm. It's absolutely true, right? It's so hard to get out of that overwhelm and then just reset yourself and try and do it moment by moment, category by category. And actually, if you just scroll down a little bit more here, we've got a question here around, if you hit burnout stage, would you recommend incremental improvement or recovery across all areas, or try and get one area well and truly balanced before moving on to the next? That's a great question.
Yeah, look, so it depends how we define burnout, which is why we have a diagnostic. At a certain point, we do use burnout as quite a term all over the place. If someone's truly in burnout, like really fatigued. So I'm in sport, we call that an overtraining syndrome or a fatigue syndrome, really strong burnout, which has similar symptoms as depression. Look, if all you can muster the energy for is incremental, well then start there. But generally you're probably trying to hit more categories than just one. And to be fair, when you really are on the burnout stage, it's like everything gets triggered. So what we know is that when someone's down mentally, it affects them emotionally. When someone's down physically, it affects them emotionally and mentally. And so all of these things kind of add to each other.
Yeah.
It depends a little bit. So part of the response is how long you've been feeling this way. If it's been months and months on end or years on end, it's like you might need total timeout. If it's just like you've kind of just recently kind of feel like you've hit burnout in the last few weeks, you might be able to coax yourself back into a better energy by, hitting a few bits of incremental recovery in a few of those areas.
It also might be duration. So
yeah.
How long? One of the things we talk about in the diagnostic is, and Sean put this in because it was so important, is how long someone has been feeling this way. So is it an ongoing issue that's been, 6+ more months? And if it's total burnout and it's been going on for that long, I'd say that there's I'm just laughing at some of the questions. Sorry, they're just good ones. That's all. Then there's obviously something you need to address, right? So if there are also red flags. So if you're feeling like you're in burnout, but there are questions you're asking yourself in all seriousness, things like, I don't want to be here anymore, or, more serious questions, guys, this is really, really key stuff. This is an indication that there's more important things to address with yourself. It might not be a quick social interaction recovery. It might be talking to someone, checking in, making sure that you're in a good space. And quite often it's those people that think they're going along okay and doing all right that actually could really do is just having that really important check-in. And luckily these days, talking to a counsellor, talking to friends, talking to specialist therapists isn't taboo anymore. In fact, it's sort of like you go to the gym for your brain. So that stuff's really, really key. If you feel like you're in burnout, 100%, if it's been going on for a few weeks, I'd say that's definitely a moment where you need to check in with someone and explain how you feel, and then investigate that a little bit more.
And look, there's a question here. How is this relatable to trauma? And, once again, as a psychologist, what I found interesting in my research with athletes is that an overtraining syndrome in its deepest form had all the same symptoms as clinical depression. And oftentimes the worst overtraining syndromes in an athlete could occur with athletes that weren't training that hard. So this caused us to dig a little deeper. And some of the most tiring or energetically tiring things are suppressed emotions. So we know from scientific research, for example, you can show two groups of people an emotionally charged film, a short film, and you ask one group of people to allow themselves to feel their emotions, and then another group of people, they got to suppress their emotions. They got to just hold them in, tuck them away, and then they're given two tasks, one a problem-solving task and then a physical task, an endurance task. And the group that had to hold their emotions in did worse on both. They were just like it was more tiring to hold on to stuff. And, so to some extent, when we talk about the word trauma, and I've dealt with a lot of clients who have dealt with, who some of the most energy draining things are actually what are long ago suppressed emotions. We all have stuff that we've experienced growing up. We often feel we've dealt with things. So this is sort of getting more onto the mental health side of things, but absolutely no doubt that when you experience something overwhelming at the time, and we see this in Army veterans with post-traumatic stress disorders, they go away and it's just so overwhelming. Their brain goes, I can't deal with it, and it shuts it out, just like in that short film, except that the brain does it automatically. And that trauma is like a locked ball of, it's like the emotions are on a treadmill, but they're just going and going and going and going underneath the surface. And I've had clients who weren't even aware of how that trauma was just draining them of energy for decades, and they found relief in being able to acknowledge it and deal with it. So that gets once again more to the mental health side of things. But if you're sometimes you're looking in every direction to say, why am I struggling here? I eat well, I exercise, I do so much right, and I'm still struggling. Sometimes then you do have to look at the little deeper stuff. So I'm not sure if that answers that question about trauma, but it's certainly it's a continuum. Like we're all on that continuum, and yeah.
Yeah, and actually,
nothing wrong with you if you had trauma, but there's something wrong with your experiences, and that's
that's exactly right.
But this is a way of looking at it differently. We're not sick; we're just out of balance, and maybe have been for decades.
And I think one of the things that is why this area of research is so important is because if you go through this and you're doing your micro injections of recovery, and Christine and I we've had this discussion, which is that if you're doing everything right, you're covering everything off, you really are giving yourself all of that energy back in each of those areas. and you're still not feeling good, that's a warning sign. However, if you are doing all those things and you're suddenly feeling energized, great. So you're doing the right thing, you're on the right track. It might just be a case of keeping on top of it, making sure that your reds are matching your greens, each category is like for like. You'll probably find that you are stronger in one category than you are in another, that you've got great recovery in one area but not such good ones in another. That's generally what we find. And they tend to be more around the emotional recovery, which people don't think of doing. So yeah, ultimately, if you are feeling like you're doing everything right, but it's still something wrong, then I'd say there's something deeper to look at for sure.
And I want to acknowledge too that sometimes, so just as a couple of case studies and examples, I've had clients over the years who have, when they deal with some of the emotional energy drains, that they kind of are just in the background. They've never, like they finally reach out and ask for help. They get relief from things like autoimmune dysfunction. I've had clients with Crohn's disease. I've had clients with, different kinds of autoimmune dysfunction or chronic headaches, and it's a real physical ailments, and they've been to their doctor, they've been on every diet, they've been on every medication, they're trying everything. That doesn't mean that this is a solution to everything, but this is more, like I say, more about understanding our energy and our health as a human being and looking at all those multiple systems. So, it is getting that when you balance everything works a bit better. So I've seen clients go into full remission when they get on top of their energy management in a much bigger way.
This is great. So Penny, yes, it's a really, really excellent way of looking at it. She's asked, so instead of saying I'm stressed, I'm out of balance. Absolutely. Because I'm stressed is as much of a badge of honor as I'm busy. Don't you love that? How are you doing? I'm busy. Everyone's busy. Life's busy. But as soon as you even say that, actually, even as soon as those words come out of your mouth, you've created I'm busy, and that's your story, right? So I'm out of balance is really quite empowering. It's just saying I'm out of whack right now, but if I do a couple of things right, I can shift it and I can be a bit more productive over here. I can be a bit more helpful over here. I can be a better parent, whatever it might be. So yeah, exactly right. Productive, yeah.
But
not busy.
It's like I say, it comes so much back down to the mindset. You'll find, how does it work when you're under pressure, or when you have something like one of the common ones we get, and we talked about this with the group, was, a mom saying, yeah, but I've got to put my kids first. Or maybe a dad saying the same thing. I've got to put my family first. I don't have time to take care of me. And in fact, we have to shift our thinking, because putting your kids first means taking care of you. Mm-hmm. Because at some point, and I've experienced this too. So I can see it coming sometimes. As much as all of the stuff, you can still get it wrong. A few weeks of travel, and I'm multiple time zones. I get some bad sleep, and the kids have a sniff. And next thing you know, I'm flat and I'm lying in bed for a few days. I'm completely useless to my family and the ones I love. So, that analogy of in the airplanes when they say you have to put your oxygen mask on first. We want to shift our thinking about the self-care. Is that I usually start off a little bit softer and say you got to give yourself permission to recover, not just sort of go, okay, no, I don't have time. I've got other people I've got to take care of. I got work priorities. And probably the more pushing that from a softer permission to recover is be responsible for your recovery, because really that's what's going to set you up. Stress weakens, recovery strengthens. And, one of the things I know is that when you're tired, you often feel unfit, you feel unhealthy, and you just think, maybe I've got to do more to take care of, to get myself fitter and healthier. Like I know with athletes, they'd be training so hard, they'd feel fatigued. And an athlete who feels fatigued says, I'm not fit enough. And if you're an athlete and you're full time and you think you're not fit enough, what do?
Train harder.
You train harder, but you need to really think, how do I actually recover harder? Because that's what will coax the body back into an adaptive response.
That's awesome, guys. So just before you head off, I'd love you to touch a little bit on the importance of sleep, because I know that I need 8 hours. Like there's no way around it. If I don't get my 8 hours, I don't perform as well the following day. So I make sure I'm off all devices by 9:30 most times. This last week, I've had some amazing light bulb moments happen at night, so I've stayed up a little bit later to work on that. But most of the time I'm getting my body ready for sleep from 9:30 to 10 o'clock, and then it's drifting off, and then I'm getting that full 8 hours. But can you just share with people, because in the beginning, sometimes you are so driven and so focused on your goals in this business that you find yourself staying up to 11 o'clock midnight. We're on amazing health products that allow us to, have energy, sustain energy that long. But can you just share with the guys that there's no need to do that? Like, it is really important to get your body to recover, and sleep is a crucial part of that.
Yeah, I mean, there's actually lots of really, really good stats, and I don't actually have them all with me, but I've got a couple. So one of the important things, like Christine says, is to, as much as possible, get off your devices at least an hour before you want to go to bed or go to sleep. Your melatonin takes an hour to kick in as soon as that's closed off. So if you're not turning your device off till midnight, your melatonin is not kicking in till 1 o'clock. And you need that melatonin to help you get to sleep. A lot of people will say, oh, but I can get to sleep straight away. But the type of sleep that you experience when you're finally in that sleep state is so, so key to your recovery. Like I said, I don't have the stats exactly in front of me, but your brain is doing a lot of learning and remembering and studying while you're asleep. So when you've actually got into that deep REM sleep, that's when your brain goes to work. So say, for example, the day before, they use music as an example, actually, which is quite a smart one. And if anybody gets the chance to look it up, Matthew Walker is a neuroscientist from Berkeley, California University, and he's phenomenal. He's a sleep neuroscientist, and his stuff is fantastic. His research is amazing. But here's an example of a musician who, say, learns a chord chart the night before, goes to sleep, and then the following night, your brain is actually, whilst you're asleep, is learning it over and over and over and over and over again. So by the time you wake up the following morning, and they did this test on somebody, went to play it and actually managed to play that chord chart perfectly. So your body is doing all that rehearsing that you've learnt the night before the following day. And there's something like, I think it's 30% increase in cardiovascular improvement when you have more than 7 hours sleep. So between 7 and 8 hours a night is your optimum. There's a saying that says basically half your sleep, half your life. So you literally are taking years off your life if you don't have sufficient sleep. And 7 hours isn't enough. It's really 7 to 8 in order for you to get that full recovery period and get that full sleep recovery in that time. And I know it's not easy to do, but this has had huge impact on people's work. It's had massive, massive impact in health. So in the healthcare industry, there's some incredible stats, actually some really scary stats around doctors, surgeons who've had insufficient sleep and then gone and done a 60-hour work week on hardly any sleep. Now, we know that you not only do you learn in those 8 hours, but you actually improve DNA in that time. And not only do you improve DNA, you can lose crucial DNA if you don't get that full amount of sleep. So you've got these doctors and surgeons or whatever going to perform, some kind of brain exam the following night after no sleep. I know that I wouldn't want him working or her working on my brain. That amount of sleep would actually make you legally drunk in some cases. So you can be legally drunk by just having not enough sleep. I have got some really good stats on it, which I'll post that for you guys. But the stats on it are phenomenal.
And
super important.
Absolutely. And a couple of questions come through. Can you get too much sleep? And I would suggest that if you feel like you're sleeping too much, like you're just, you might be sleeping 10 or 12 hours, your body's probably telling you that you're deprived. So I wouldn't say you're going to get too much, but if your body's feeling a need to sleep that much, there's probably something out of balance. And you might not need to sleep so much if we start to look across all those 5 categories and go, where am I actually not getting recovery during the day, such that my body just needs to shut down for longer and longer. Now, I do want to acknowledge a couple of these. I do want to acknowledge that there's a couple of, there are individual differences. So you're going to there's less than 1% of the population that can actually survive on like 5 hours sleep. Don't compare yourself to someone like that. So just be aware. Most of us are in that 7 to 8 hour 7 to 8 hours. And some might need a little bit more too. Certainly children need more. 9-10 hours sleep is pretty much the norm for kids or more. So it doesn't, like those are the averages, but certainly don't get caught up on, oh, I know some, they sleep 5 hours a night or 4 hours a night and they're fine. That's an anomaly. It might even be less than, a lot less than 1%.
And we don't know the long-term damage of that either. DNA wise, we don't know the long-term damage. And by the way, just on that point that person's made here, the sad truth is, guys, you cannot bank sleep and you cannot buy it back. I'm sorry to say. So you can have a little nap in the afternoon if you've had not much sleep the night before, it's not the same because you're not getting the full 8 hours of recovery type of sleep. So it's the quality of your sleep that's equal or more important as the duration. So have a nap in the afternoon by all means, but it's not going to be the same as you getting those full hours. That's where your scheduling is really, really important. Like Christine said, making sure you're trying to go to bed at the same time every night and up at the same time in the morning if you can. That's your body working most efficiently.
We do have a comment here about how do you get around interrupted sleep, and I think clearly it depends what's interrupting your sleep. We've got children, so we know that does happen for one reason or the other. We all go through stages of our life where we've interrupted sleep, and it highlights how important the energy balance is in the recovery during your day. So certainly sleep is the number one form of recovery. But if we're getting interrupted sleep, then we have to think of, okay, what's my stress load the next day? So if I've had a really rough night and, I might consider not doing as much as I planned I was going to do the next day if there's some intense stressors. So that it's a little bit like, and I might do a little bit more recovery. So that's where the sort of the guilt-free or the, in a sense, the permission to recover is like, I've had a rough night. I'm not going to go, and this is where it gets difficult. I want to tie this into what someone else said. I went for a walk tonight. Probably need to rest instead, but I thought I was doing something good for myself. I would generally suggest, unless you're walking at midnight, a walk is most of the time probably pretty good recovery. There's some good, if you're outdoors, you get some good mental recovery. It's not physically too taxing. You are doing something good for yourself. If you'd said I went for an intense 10K run after a long day, then I'd say, maybe you're taking on too much. So like it's all in gradations, and you're kind of always thinking about where my balance is at. So like if I have an interrupted night, let's just say, for example, I have 100 units of energy every day to spend, and they restore with a good sleep overnight. If I have an interrupted night, I'm down to like 85 units. Well, then clearly I can't spend as much as I did the day before if I had the full 100. It's like kind of just thinking about numbers. So you're just thinking about how do you go, okay, I've got to respond differently today with a bit more recovery and whatnot. Joel, you also said, can I reverse the damage? I'm unable to sleep for years. Absolutely. One of the beautiful things about the human body is it's extraordinarily adaptive. We have such a capacity to grow and adapt. And if we start taking care of ourselves, we're here because we're all interested in health. These are some tweaks and some nuances to how to get that better, but absolutely you can reverse that damage. So I just wanted to touch base on a few of those.
That's amazing. Awesome, guys. And with my experience with the diagnostic, it was so thought-provoking. So, Kate said, guys, if you want to do the diagnostics, like send them a message or get in contact with me and I'll put you in contact with the guys. But for me, it brought up a lot around alcohol for me, and that I was using alcohol at the end of the day. If I was having a stress day with the kids or something like that, I was turning to the alcohol to help calm and balance me. Now, they weren't worried about that because it was just like 1 or 2 here or there and it wasn't out of control. But then what it was happening was when I was going socially, I was going past those 2, 3, 4 drinks. And then once I got past the 4th, it was wiping me out for a day or 2 and I couldn't get back into my genius, into my flow. And that's a red flag. That's where it's affecting my productivity. It's affecting energy. It's affecting all my systems. So I really found the diagnostics so useful, especially for that area, and just seeing how I was handling stress and how I was, like, where I was actually putting my energy, who I was giving my power to in taking my energy. We've all got those people in our lives that kind of suck it out of us, the vampires, the energy vampires. So I think this community is amazing for so many people because, one, side of the coin, we do have those people in our lives, but then we've got this amazing community here that we can jump in and jump on these calls and be surrounded by positive, inspiring, empowering people, you know, so it kind of helps put the energy back in and you get to fill your cup again. So I just want to say, guys, like, honestly, that was an incredible call. This is totally different to anything we've had on these calls before, but it's so relevant to any person out there. Like, it doesn't matter what profession you're in. And I just want you guys to know that you do have permission to switch off. No one's going to be dying in this business. Nothing is that urgent that it can't wait, okay? And a lot of you, you know, you get back to your team or you get back to your customers straight away, and if you don't, you feel bad about it. Or if you switch off, you know, for me, I don't know if many of you knew this, but on Friday night, Joel and Vicky would have seen me pretty stressed, and definitely not myself. You know, I thought Archer had broken his foot, so I had to go to emergency, and, you know, that was a really long, crazy night. So today, it was the day that I got to actually catch up and put the energy back in and just switch off from business and everything and just be a mum, you know. So
yeah,
you've got to go, okay, how much energy did that take? And it took a lot. And then what can I do to help recover? And by doing your diagnostic, guys, it's really made me more aware of all that and being okay and getting rid of the guilt around it, because that's a big issue for so many of us, especially parents. I think, you know, trying to juggle everything and be everything to everyone. So I just want to say thank you so much from the bottom of my heart for your time tonight. I know it's been a crazy busy time for you, but everyone has enjoyed it. I've seen the comments and I've seen the people light up, and yeah, we can't thank you enough for being on here tonight.
Well, you're welcome, and really, it was lovely to see all the people making comments on the sidebar here. And, you know, we're just scratching the surface. I mean, we have, I run a 2-day corporate workshop on this. So it's what we do for a whole 2 days. And we do, you know, we go into diagnostic and there's one-on-one follow-ups. And we do have a goal to get this onto a mobile app. So someone earlier said, hey, you know, is there some way to get this rolling into a system? There definitely is. Hang tight. We're going to have something online fairly soon, and definitely would love to follow up with any or all of you.
Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you so much. We love your charts. Thanks, guys. And thanks to all of you for jumping on tonight. Now I want you all switched off within, you know, the next hour. Okay. Don't let me catch you on Facebook.
Or put your phones on night shift, and put your laptops on night shift too.
Yeah.